Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. If we were covering or dealing with any other president in our country's history, that president's reliance on a 35-year-old aide described by journalists who cover the White House as a, quote, human binky, an aide who wrote letters of her devotion to the president so concerning that even the United States Secret Service was alarmed by her seeming obsession, the whole country would be asking, how does she still have access to the president of the United States and the White House? And is there any sort of risk involved in having her there? But because we could not be covering a White House any further from anything resembling normal, what we're dealing with instead is Donald Trump's closest allies losing their collective minds over any mention of or coverage of the well-documented closeness of his relationship with this aide. Her name is Natalie Harp. It appears she is never not by his side. Privately, reporting reveals that Harp's unwavering loyalty is making some people within Trump's White House and inner circle concerned. From that Times reporting, quote, Ms. Harp's displays of devotion have unnerved some of her colleagues. Several videos shared with the New York Times show Ms. Harp sprinting across great distances to keep up with Mr. Trump's golf cart as it putters across his course in Scotland. And in a letter to Donald Trump, that was after the trip that was viewed by the New York Times, she writes, quote, I also am sorry if I was an embarrassment walking the course in Scotland. The letter goes on to say, quote, I want things to always be right between us. I also know I've been distracted all week, forgetting to eat throughout the days and even forgetting to sleep and only catching a couple hours at a time, end quote. The letter concludes with all my heart, Natalie. And adding to our quickly expanding understanding of the relationship between the president and this aide and the lengths that this aide, Natalie Harp, will go to remain by Trump's side at all times. CNN is out with some new reporting today about Harp's insistence that she accompany Donald Trump in his motorcade to his 2023 criminal trial in New York. They write this, quote, there wasn't room for Harp, the hyper-loyal aide whose devotion to Trump had quickly entrenched her within his orbit. A screaming match in the lobby ensued, with Harp insisting that Trump had personally asked her to attend the court appearance. Two sources familiar with the matter tell CNN. Denied a seat, but determined not to be left behind, Harp jumped into an SUV trunk, according to the two sources, and confirmed by a photo obtained by CNN. For some, that kind of behavior might raise alarm bells. Harp's own brother reacted to that incident by calling it a, quote, unhealthy obsession. And speaking to CNN last night, here's how he explains why he thinks his sister has become close to Donald Trump.
My mom raised us with the idea that American exceptionalism was the correct way of looking at things, that the United States is the boss of the world, that, like, you know, slavery was back then, that was normal. People weren't bad because they had slaves. And honestly, and it's like Trump wants to take all those books out of schools. He wants to rewrite history. And so, like, I think that my sister, unfortunately, didn't break out of that delusion that my mom raised us with. And Trump is like everything that my mom taught us to respect. Trump's best friends are people who are his fan club, you know? Like, and so she's his biggest fan. And so that's probably why he likes her. He thinks that he saved her life. So, like, somebody living with that kind of gratitude, that must feel pretty good.
A growing spotlight on Donald Trump's closeness to an aide so devoted to him she had the Secret Service concerned is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former Deputy White House Press Secretary during Donald Trump's first term as president, now spokesperson for Home of the Brave, Sarah Matthews is here. Also joining us, senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, I think I first knew of this aide from a Mark Caputo piece of reporting that Tim Miller reminded me of today. I didn't know her name, but I knew that there was suddenly an aide printing out positive coverage. And I don't know if the piece described her as a human printer or if that was sort of the analysis afterward of filling his mind with the idea that everyone liked everything he was doing, as a difference maybe between the first term when he really sat around consuming a lot of broadcast cable news. And then it was Regime Change, the book written by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, that I think introduced me to this individual. And I'm struck by something Maggie Haberman said this week, that the Secret Service was concerned about what seemed like an obsession. What is your understanding of how close she is to Donald Trump right now and whether the Secret Service has those concerns right now?
Nicole, the reporting is absolutely right. And I actually became familiar with her 2022, more 2023 as well, right around the time that initial report about the way in which she would print off papers for Donald Trump while he was out golfing or wherever he was first reported. Because at the time, there was somebody, an aide to Donald Trump, that was around him at Mar-a-Lago that had talked to federal agents and was effectively not cooperating, but was at least talking to them. And we were trying to pinpoint at the time who it could be. And I had mentioned the name Natalie Harp, and this one individual told me, no, it is not Natalie Harp. And then that is where we became more familiar with the role that she played in what was a very small insulated circle in that time period of 2022, 2023 around Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago after he had left Washington, D.C. And she was somebody that he had grown fond of and somebody that he grew to trust in a world in which he had great mistrust of most people. And that is where I was told by one person just a couple of weeks ago that they know that if they want to get something in front of Donald Trump without messaging or calling him directly, but to catch his attention, that you send it directly to Natalie. It could be just simply an article, and that she will bring it up and the headline could catch his attention. That is the most effective way to get in front of the President of the United States is by going directly to Natalie Harp. And so I think that this is an extension of the potential concerns about what that type of relationship looks like. On one hand, he has a trusted aide. On another hand, there is much of what we do not know. She does not have an extensive background. And one other point I'd make, Nicole, is the fact that I got a message about a month ago, July 22nd, the day of the dignified transfer of 4 American soldiers returning to Dover Air Base. And the President of the United States, Secretary Hegseth, they were on the tarmac. But I was messaged after the fact by somebody saying, look at this photo. Natalie Harp is on the tarmac, that it is outside of the protocol of any other administration, let alone for a dignified transfer of American soldiers who died in war. And there were deep questions and skepticisms of this relationship and how somebody who is serving in this capacity of the president could be in a position to be somebody welcoming the return of American soldiers.
Well, I mean, I've worked in a White House. There's one answer, because the White House chief of staff either is fine with it or is too weak to tell Trump or this aide, Natalie Harp, that it's inappropriate or beyond protocol. I mean, I'm confounded by the reaction. This is obviously something that they're all comfortable with until John Ossoff mentions her name in a Democratic rally. Why are they so triggered if this is a relationship they're proud enough about to showcase her at a dignified transfer, Vaughn?
Well, for number one, if there is one individual that is most effective at getting information in front of Donald Trump, and if that person is Natalie Harp, it would work to your benefit to post on social media about Natalie Harp and come to her defense, even if the mere mention of the word name Natalie and traveling with the president is a fact and doesn't go beyond that, right? Stephen Chung, the communications director, he came out and attacked our friend and a colleague to us here at the White House, Kristen Holmes, for asking the president about Natalie Harp. And yet I think that it is very much understood that the President of the United States is receiving direct information, and undoubtedly you would, one, presume that some of that information could include the defenses of her and the type of working relationship they have here at the White House.